So in section 6.2, we start talking about something called a slope field. And I wanted to show you with the Delta Math assignment how we do these. I actually like looking at slope fields. I tend to think that students feel like they're a relatively easy thing to work with. And I feel like Delta Math just made it so much easier with how they want you to create it. So a slope field is going to be a visual representation of a slope at a series of points that's represented by a differential equation. So they have to give you this differential equation. So if you look at the very beginning, it will ask you to create a slope field, and it tells you that dy dx equals negative y over x squared. That is your differential equation, and that is how you're going to find the slope at any point on a graph. So what they will do is they will draw a series of segments. I always call them like baby slopes, and they will ask you to manipulate them to have the correct slope based on what we get when we plug the coordinates into the differential equation. So you can do them in any order. You just kind of pick and choose, start where you want to go. So we are going to start with, I'm going to start with the point 1, 0. So if I put 1, 0 in, I would have a 0 on top, a 1 on the bottom. That would give me a 0 slope. So what I have to do is I have to drag that corner, the little pink corner. It's kind of like a real small pale pink. If you put your pen or your finger, your mouse, whatever you're working with on that, and slide it down to be horizontal so it shows a 0 slope. You're going to get the same thing on the other side as well at negative 1, 0, again, because you're putting 0 in for y, which is going to give you a 0 slope. So we're going to drag that one down as well. So now let's see, I'll look at the one that's 0, negative 1. So if I put 0, negative 1 in, I'm actually going to get a 0 in the denominator of my derivative. That's going to give me an undefined slope, which is going to be vertical. So I'm going to pull that one up. Same thing with the point below it, 0, negative 2, because again, you'll have 0 in the bottom, so we're going to go like that. I have noticed on AP tests, often if it is undefined, they don't make you draw anything. In this case, Delta Math actually does want you to show that it's horizontal, meaning it's an undefined slope. Or excuse me, vertical, meaning it's an undefined slope. So now let me look at 1, negative 1. So if I put 1 in for x, it's just going to give me a 1 on the bottom. And if I put negative 1 in for y, I'm going to get a negative 1 times a negative 1, which is positive. I'm not changing that slope at all. They tend to start with all the slopes at just a positive 1, and you work from there. So that slope's great. On the other side, negative 1, negative 1, I'm actually going to get the exact same thing, because when I put the negative 1 into x and square it, it's going to give me a 1, and I'm going to have a negative, negative 1. So I still have a slope of 1. So those two are not going to change. And then when I put in 1, negative 2, so my x is just 1 squared is 1, negative 2. So this is going to become a positive 2, which is just going to be slightly steeper. So I'm just going to try to drag it. And here's where I'm never quite sure exactly how much to drag it. I don't know how picky they are. Let's see. We'll go like that, see if they accept that. And the same thing's going to happen here. We're just going to get a little steeper. I don't know if they're both supposed to look the same. Well, so we'll find out together how picky they are with it. So I'm going to submit that. Yay! And the nice thing is, if you want to see what the work is, if you just like go on top of it or just like click a point, it will show you what you did below and show you what that slope should be. So even if it's not perfect, like they said this one wasn't perfect, but they still gave me credit for it. So I appreciate that it's not super picky. So let me show you another one. So here my derivative is y plus 1 over x plus 1. And I have these points. I have noticed on the AP test, they tend to make you draw 5 to 8 slope little segments. You will be drawing them, not manipulating them on a screen. And they're not super picky as far as like if it doesn't quite look like it, but your positive slope should look positive and your negative slope should look negative and your 0 slope should look horizontal. Those types of things should be easy to judge. So let's see, I'm going to put 0, 0 in. When I put 0, 0 in, I get a slope of 1. So I'm not going to change the 1 at the origin. I'm going to go down. So now I'm going to go to 0, negative 1. So 0, negative 1 is going to give me 0 on top and a 1 on the bottom. So that is just 0 slope. I love 0 slopes. They're the easiest to draw and drag. And then I think the same, let's see, when I put 0, negative 2 in, I'm still going to get 1 on the bottom. I'm going to get negative 1 on the top. So let's switch this around to a negative slope. All right, so now I'm going to look at I'm going to look at -1, 0. So when I put -1 in for x, I'm going to get a 0 on the bottom. So that's going to be an undefined slope. That's actually going to happen on the one down here as well, because a -1 for x is going to give you a 0 in the denominator. So now I'll go into the last row of points. -2, 0 would be a -1 on top and a +1 on bottom. So that's a -1 slope. There we go. And then -2, -1 is going to give me a 0 slope on top. So 0 divided by anything is going to be 0. Oh, there we go. And then finally, -2, -2 is going to give me a -1 over -1, which is a +1 slope, which is perfect. So now I'm going to submit my answer. And there we go. And again, I love that you can pick any point and they will show you every bit of what things should be plugged in. It even tells you undefined slope. It'll tell you if it's 0 slope. So that's how the Delta Math program was going to ask you to draw slope fields. And I feel like it's a very user-friendly way to do it, and they're not super picky. And it kind of shows you how it all works when you put it together on paper.